60-year-old Rajya Kanoria is a busy man these days. At the time we'd caught up with him, Kanoria had just returned from Ethiopia, where his company is setting up a textile plant to produce denim at an investment of $35 million. In this meeting with his company's advisor for Africa operations, Arun Garodia, Kanoria is being briefed about his Ethiopia operations.
We selected Ethiopia for many reasons. Prior to getting into Ethiopia, we actually also analyzed other possible countries. We had decided we will go into textiles. So we had looked at cotton growing countries, and we evaluated many countries and ultimately settled down on Ethiopia.
R.V. Kanoria is among those Indian businessmen who have been scouting opportunity and investing in a vast continent that lies west of India across the Arabian Sea and is home to more than 1 billion people with tremendous business opportunity. Former diplomat Rajiv Bhatia, who has worked as chief of Indian missions in South Africa, Lesotho and Kenya, vouches for the vast business potential of African countries.
India is a rapidly industrializing economy, and therefore India needs raw materials and natural resources in which Africa has real abundance.
Rajya Kanoria is not the only Indian businessman doing business in Africa or setting up plants there. The next generation of Indian entrepreneurs and industrialists has also set its sights on this vast continent. 31-year-old Ambuj Chaturvedi and his company Overseas Infrastructure Alliance has also been very active in Africa.
We started exploring Africa in 2004, and it was the sunrise sector. It was the sunrise where absolutely there was no growth. So obviously by pure economics that's going to be the next frontier for development and growth, with the size of population 1 billion people. And when we came across our market research, we realized that there is opportunity in every sector available over here.
The African continent comprises 54 countries. By any yardstick, Africa is massive, the world's second largest and second most populous continent after Asia. It stretches from the Mediterranean Sea in the north to the Pacific Ocean in the south. Africa accounts for 1/5 the total landmass, with an area of 30 million square kilometers and more, roughly 10 times the size of India. It has everything that attracts countries like India and China to its shores.
Huge amount of natural resources that Africa has. And the second is the huge market which Africa provides.
As per one estimate, Africa is believed to hold 90% of the world's cobalt, 90% of its platinum, 50% of gold reserves, 98% chromium reserves, 64% of its manganese, and 1/3 of its uranium.
Africa is attractive for foreign investors not only because it has abundant natural resources and a huge population base, but it is also attractive because some African countries have flexible labor laws, easy land acquisition policies, and a transparent regime for doing business.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has more than 30% of the world's diamond reserves. Guinea is the world's largest exporter of bauxite, but it is equally underdeveloped. Several African countries, particularly sub-Saharan ones that lie on the south of the Sahara Desert, are the worst performers in terms of eradicating poverty and malnutrition.
Because Africa is a huge continent. I mean, it is a continent of paradoxes and contradictions. I mean, you have very affluent parts of Africa and you have really extremely poor parts of Africa.
For most Indians, Africa, particularly South Africa, is linked with Mahatma Gandhi and the beginning of his non-violent movement against oppression and apartheid from there before joining India's freedom struggle in India. In recent times, successive Indian governments have started taking a serious interest in Africa. Bilateral trade between India and Africa rose from $1 billion to over $75 billion between 1990 and 2014.
the demand for raw materials, not only hydrocarbons but even other raw materials, because of the growth in the new emerging economies like India, China, Brazil, Turkey, Indonesia, etc. So all this added up to a kind of a synergy which led to a boost in India-Africa economic relations.
Our IT training schools were very popular with the local youth. Similarly, our banks and insurance companies, whenever I visited them, I found them, doing brisk business, whether that was in Mombasa or it was in other parts of Africa.
There are several reasons for this phenomenal growth. African countries have long grappled with violence, genocides, internal strife, lack of centralized planning. But in the last 2 decades or so, many African countries have successfully made a transition to democratic and business-friendly regimes.
African governments themselves took some very bold macroeconomic policy changes which led to an economic boom.
Today, in more countries in Africa, you have democracy than ever in the past. There is a fair degree of stability.
Africa's business potential shot up in the eyes of Indian business houses in 2010 when Sunil Mittal-led Bharti Airtel acquired Kuwait-based Zain Telecom's business in 15 African countries for $10.7 billion. Acquisition of 179 million new subscribers with a revenue base of over $13 billion made it the 5th largest telecom company in the world in terms of subscriber base.
Bharti Airtel, they created a sort of revolution in Africa by bringing down the mobile call rates, and it covered most of the big African countries.
Even prior to Bharti Telecom, Indian companies were present in Africa in the automobile, banking, IT services and pharma sectors.
The thing is, our Indian companies have to keep up that good name they have made. Similarly, Mahindras are very well-known name, Tatas and Bajaj. These are some of the big names that are known in Africa.
From the businessman's point of view, Africa is virgin territory waiting to be explored. Immense potential just waiting to be tapped.
Every single area. I mean, Africa is starved of products and services. So Ethiopia might offer opportunities in agriculture, whereas Tanzania and Kenya might offer in mining, Mozambique might offer in coal. But there are some basic industries. I think cement has a huge opportunity in Africa, huge, because there's limestone in Africa and many countries.
There is a demand in Africa for each and every sector, be it education, healthcare, you can call it IT services, tourism. So these are the small, the level of investment required to set up a small hotel is not very high. So a small businessman in India can go and do it.
Africa needs massive investment in infrastructure. Indian companies are also active in the infrastructure sector in Africa.
It's not like mining that you take out the diamond and you take it away and it's gone. There is the sugar project, the water project, the hospital, the low-cost housing. These are things which are permanent contributions to their economy, which will remain there and will only grow further and expand and create that. Create the inclusiveness in the economy of that country.
So what makes Africa attractive for Indian businesses? The answer: abundant natural resources, an unexplored market, availability of land and even cheap power in some countries.
All of Ethiopia's power is hydropower. So the cost of power is very inexpensive, which is a major factor in textiles. So it's a very stable tariff regime.
Acquisition of land for industrial and commercial purpose may be a sensitive issue in India. However, in some African countries, availability of land is not a problem.
Because Ethiopia, the land belongs to the state. Therefore, the allocation of land is made by the state. And they have a very, very clear policy on compensation. And I think that is something which is actually a huge plus point in Ethiopia.
Labour laws in some African countries are also flexible. Availability of cheap labour is also a reason for setting up labour-intensive industries like textiles in African countries.
Actually, the labour costs today are extremely low there, so there is no problem in hiring labour. And I mean, once you hire in a poor country like that, just like in India, I mean, at least from our point of view as a company, I don't think it is labour laws which are hampering our business, because we have been good to labour and we wish to be good to labour wherever we are in the world.
There's a generation gap between the likes of Rajyavardhan Kanoria and Ambuj Chaturvedi, but both of them are determined to make a mark in this vast continent.
Africa is a virgin market for any businessman, full of minerals and natural resources. But it also has a unique set of challenges. We will discuss all this and industry expectations after a short break. Welcome back. In this segment, we will analyze the problems faced by Indian businesses while doing business in Africa and their expectations from the government and diplomacy. We will also discuss competition from other rival countries.
Business opportunity is one thing, but actually actioning that on the ground often poses a far tougher challenge. Countries that appear attractive due to the sheer size of their economies and availability of resources have become a no-go area for foreign businesses due to violence and internal strife.
I can't be critical about a country as I am looking at it only from outside. But from outside, it seems that at least I would not like to expose myself or my company or my people to any kind of lifestyle which is a threat to their personal security.
Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa, well over $500 billion, considerably bigger than even South Africa, which weighs in at less than $400 billion. But militant organizations like the Boko Haram make it difficult for foreigners to operate in the region.
You see, it's a serious problem. In my opinion, doing business in Nigeria is very different from doing business in Ethiopia. Many people have joined us, so from example, from Nigeria, and they have moved because of only one reason. Even at slightly lower salaries, they have chosen to move away from countries like Nigeria.
Not just Nigeria, Africa's 8th largest economy, Kenya, has repeatedly been the target of brutal Mumbai-like terror attacks. In September 2013, terrorists belonging to the Al-Shabaab, a group affiliated to Al-Qaeda, seized the famous Westgate Mall in the capital Nairobi and killed more than 80 people. In April 2015, terrorists stormed the Garissa University College and killed more than 150 people. North African countries like Egypt, Algeria and Libya have also witnessed large-scale violence and terror attacks in recent years.
Nigerian economy is far more developed today than the Ethiopian economy in terms of industry, and so is the Kenyan economy, so is the Ugandan economy. I mean, they are much more developed, they have much more Indian investment going into those countries than into Ethiopia. Because Nigeria also, together with challenges, provides us much better returns.
Which is why Africa is still not as popular as it could be. So it's a conscious decision if you want to work in Africa, that you have to take time, you have to be connected to the ground, because then you'll get to know that something wrong is about to happen. So you'll take those safety measures in place.
Sometimes it is apprehensions of coups against incumbent governments and takeover of assets of foreign companies. From the early 1960s to the late 80s, African countries have seen more than 70 coups and 13 presidential assassinations.
Investment risks are there. The political risks, the security threats are there, but I think we feel that your strategy towards Africa you have to have a lot of focus in Africa. and you have to really monitor, at least us personally, we monitor every aspect of our projects by ourselves and we're fully involved. So there are times where you can anticipate a threat as well. So you take those safety measures.
There is violence and bloodshed and terrorism and instability. Obviously, Indian companies will have to take all these standard precautions, etc.
So there's security issues and lack of political stability. Indian businesses looking to operate in African countries also face another issue. Many African countries do not have companies big enough to partner foreign investors.
Very few large businessmen in Africa, as opposed again to working with other business communities in other parts of the world. Working with the African business community is restricted to very few people.
That is one of the challenges, that to be able to find that kind of potential over there, who can partner with you and be able to protect your investments and ensure that you get the kind of return. So you have to do it yourself.
Then there's intense competition from countries like China, the US and European Union countries for African resources and market opportunities. Trade between China and Africa rose 700% during the 1990s. China has become Africa's largest trading partner.
Now, China is a very much larger economy, and therefore it is natural that they have greater financial muscle to go and maybe get or even grab some opportunities immediately.
Talk of China's growing influence in Africa is rife in diplomatic and business circles. They also speak of how India is rapidly falling behind China in this race.
And when I go to a Chinese mission, I find that there are, they have created entire colonies for Chinese missions to be located with 1,000 people. They have created Chinese industrial parks. I mean, in Ethiopia they have Chinese industrial parks. Now the Chinese industrial park actually invites Chinese to come into their own parks, which they have created of hundreds of hectares of land.
In case of manufactured products, China is the preferred destination for Africans.
Buying cheap goods, Africans automatically go to China. If you go to Canton Fair, you'll see it's full of African businessmen. When it comes to quality, good quality, high quality goods, Africans immediately talk about Europe, because a lot of Africa was colonized by, many countries were colonized by the European countries. So that had created some sort of a natural linkage, but they still, maybe the Europeans had done a better job than India has about selling their products, because they say, oh, your product should be of this European standard.
Other than external factors, Indian industry faces domestic problems that limit smooth business operations with Africa. Access to low-cost credit from financial institutions tops that list.
Banking sector is still very cautious of Africa right now in India. So that is something which really, that realization has to come in across India, that Africa is a new growth story. The awareness about Africa has to be really created outside Delhi.
To support Indian businesses operating in Africa, the Indian government announced a concessional credit line for India's partner countries in Africa. In the last decade, India has provided credit of $7 billion to African countries under this route. That's 70% of India's total concessional credit offered.
Awareness about Africa outside Delhi has to be created, which has been the biggest challenge. So that comes with banking, and then eventually that, suppose if I want to tie up with partners to come with me on a project, even they will be risk averse. They'll give me tough terms and conditions. They'll say, no, we can only help you till here. Beyond that, you do it yourself. We've heard horror stories about Africa.
For example, the implementations of the lines of credit projects, there was a lot of delay. But with the creation of the DPA, that is Development Partnership Administration within the MEA, the LOC implementation has improved.
Africa accounts for 20% of the Earth's land mass. It's fertile land too for agriculture, but yield is low as African countries lack finances and modern techniques to make the most of it.
There large tracts of land are available which are arable, which are extremely good for agriculture and remain undeveloped because modern agricultural techniques have not been adopted and they have not been taught how to use a lot of this land.
There was a very successful project in Senegal on rice production, which was done by the Kirloskers under the Lines of Credit project. It started in a very small way, and it was a success in the sense that 10 years ago Senegal was importing rice, and today Senegal is a net exporter of rice.
That's where opportunity arises for India. India has the potential to invest in Africa's agri-sector to ensure food security.
When India's population is increasing as rapidly as it is, there is going to be a demand ultimately for protein, because affluence combined with population is going to result in a shift in our demand patterns. I think that if there is a strategic alignment, then our food security can be ensured as a result of developing these relationships with other African countries.
Even as Indian success stories overseas abound, there are suggestions of India needing to scale up its engagement in Africa's agri-sector.
What we can do is to provide the the value chain in agriculture. That is the greatest difficulty in Africa today, that there is no viable chain of value between the producer and the consumer. So India can come in a big way by introducing food processing and other industries.
Despite the problems, India does hold huge advantages over business rivals, and that derives from rich ancient cultural and trade links between the two. India's freedom struggle led by Mahatma Gandhi inspired many African nations and leaders like Nelson Mandela to gain freedom from colonial rule and oppression. There's huge respect for Indians in general.
In Africa, I have had teachers who are Indians. So that automatically, that sense of respect is there, or at least that sense of trust is there, that, this is something which is known to us in a good way, which evokes good memories. So when you meet someone in West Africa, they'll say, oh, my teacher used to be an Indian. So automatically, he doesn't say, oh, I met a businessman who did not work well with me from Africa. So that sense of trust is still there.
There's also a big appreciation for Indian manufactured products in Africa. Indian auto and pharma companies have been hugely successful in cost-sensitive African markets.
Both patented drugs as well as generic drugs are extremely popular in Africa. Indian generic drugs against HIV was a big success in South Africa, and the leaders praised them.
Industry expects the government to play a more proactive role to realize the potential of India-Africa bilateral trade.
A lot of government support is required to make loans available at a cheaper price, to make sure that the credit guarantees, the investment guarantees, insurances for protecting against expropriation, etc. These need to be put in place, and that's where I think the government of India can play a very supportive role.
Former diplomats who've served in Africa counter industry's charges.
Private sector wants to go there, they have to work towards that. The government can provide some support, but the government cannot be spoon-feeding them all the time. I mean, they have to take risks, they have to understand the country, they have to make studies.
Much rides on the third India-Africa summit, expected to transform India-Africa relations.
It's a golden opportunity to hear from the Africans of how they are evolving and what kind of cooperation and partnership that they are looking from India.
Industry feels Prime Minister Modi has introduced a strong dose of dynamism in India's foreign policy. Yet shortcomings in the follow-up indicate a bureaucracy that is slow and falling behind.
We are building these castles outside, but we need to put those foundations even here. So I think economic policy in India needs to keep pace with the Prime Minister.
Obviously, the government itself can only do so much, because we cannot expect the government to do everything. All aspects of our society have to be involved with our Prime Minister in terms of delivering the value or delivering the relationship which is expected between India and another country.
If the Prime Minister has lots of ideas, the bureaucracy has to catch up and increase their speed in the implementation.
It is true that India has realized Africa's business potential for its own good. India and Africa complement each other in terms of resources and needs. They also share a colonial past, cultural links, and a vision for a prosperous future by working together. India and Africa are natural friends and partners even beyond business and trade. For Rajya Sabha Television, I am Krishnanand Tripathi. Thanks for watching this special report. Keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.
Here we know, this is the ancient African music.